Ever since the end of the Apollo program, humans haven't set their foot on the moon. However, NASA has been working hard at not just stepping on the moon once again, but also making it the first foothold of the space frontier. To achieve this, they'll have to create an entire base on the moon. The entire project, which is codenamed Artemis, is said to be among the biggest space exploration projects in the history of humankind. But what will the program consist of? How will NASA manage to construct said base? And, most importantly, what will the base be used for? Join us and let's analyze the largest space project in the past 50 years as we take a look at how NASA plans to build the first moon base. Taking a look at the project, you'd be surprised to see how similar it is to the famed Apollo missions. Just like the missions that first put humans on the moon, the Artemis program's development phase has been full of superlatives. For starters, the rockets that'll be used for the project are expected to be the biggest and most powerful rockets ever created. It'll also show the technological advancements in terms of space exploration, just like its spiritual predecessor. There will be numerous Artemis missions. However, the most significant one will be Artemis 3. Its importance lies in the fact that it'll be the mission that'll bring humans to the lunar surface more than 50 years after we've last visited it. What's more, Artemis 3 will also put the first female and the first person of color on the moon too. This means that apart from being a major technological jump forward, it'll also be a significant social milestone. According to NASA's Steve Creech, the value of the Artemis program lies in its functionality. Unlike the Apollo missions, which were just showing off the US's space capabilities, Artemis will actually serve a real purpose. By creating a base, NASA will inherently create the first proper human checkpoint on the soil that doesn't belong to Earth. This, in Creech's opinion, makes the Artemis even more important than its spiritual predecessor. And this leads us to the question, how does NASA actually plan on building the base? The base itself won't be constructed imminently and as a whole. Instead, it'll go through multiple phases of development before being fully constructed, and these phases will take time. First of all, NASA plans on doing excursions to the moon without creating a base itself. After the technology proves reliable, NASA plans on establishing a camp that allows astronauts to stay on the surface of the moon for multiple days. This camp will offer basic creature comforts that allow astronauts to feel more relaxed and comfortable on the moon's surface. The camp itself won't serve a practical function except for allowing the astronauts to remain on the surface for longer periods of time. However, it will get upgrades, and it will advance over time until it turns into a fully fledged base. The facilities will all be made using large-scale 3D printing that is being developed by ICON, the recipient of NASA's $57.2 million contract for lunar construction. Large-scale 3D printing allows for cheap and fast construction of facilities, which can also be done fully autonomously and remotely. Once the base is fully developed, it will allow the astronauts to properly explore the lunar surface, more than it was ever possible, and it will allow them to stay on the moon for up to a month. However, that makes us ask ourselves, how will there be enough oxygen for astronauts? In January 2023, NASA announced their plan on creating a pipeline on the moon. The pipeline, named the Lunar South Polar Oxygen Pipeline, will be the first ever permanent human structure ever created on the moon. The pipeline will transport high-purity oxygen from a production source to a storage plant that will be located in the imminent vicinity of the planned location of the base itself. The oxygen will be provided thanks to the recently developed electrolysis process named molten regolith electrolysis. The process will allow the extraction of specific elements from lunar dust that have a large amount of oxygen stored in them. According to NASA's calculations, this process will be enough to produce more than 10,000 kilograms of oxygen per year, which will be enough for the base to be self-sustainable. The oxygen itself will be used in numerous facilities of the base, but it'll also be used as an oxidizer propellant for launch vehicles that are departing on the moon. This electrolysis process will be demonstrated on the moon as early as 2024, and it'll provide direct support to astronauts once they first land on the moon. So, we'll have a consistent way of returning back to Earth and breathing on the moon. However, the question still remains, how will astronauts be able to explore the moon? Well, that'll be achieved by using specially designed moon rovers. The LTV Lunar Terrain Vehicle is mechanically very similar to side-by-side ATVs. LTVs will usually be driven by astronauts. However, they will also be capable of being remotely controlled. NASA is also planning on implementing full autonomy to the LTV, as by doing so, they'll be able to automatically explore and document the surface of the moon in great detail. The combination of all these features will finally give us a definitive answer on the biggest question that surrounds the lunar base, and that is, what function will the base have? The biggest reason why the base is being constructed is because NASA plans on seeking out crucial resources on the moon. Since the location of the base is set to be on the south pole of the moon, scientists will be able to research the dark side of the moon, alongside numerous craters that have been hidden in the shadows. These craters hide elements and resources that might be crucial for both humans on Earth and for further space exploration. For starters, it's expected that these craters hold large amounts of water ice. This is important because if there is water on the moon, it would mean that there is a possibility of water being present on other, more distant planets. Furthermore, water itself can be used as a propellant, and the moon itself can serve as a gas station for spaceships that'll explore other planets in the future. Plus, by having direct access to water, the base itself will be much more self-sufficient than if it had to rely on water from Earth. All of this is very impressive. However, what guarantees that it isn't just a science fiction tale? And to answer this question, we finally have to ask, when will NASA build the lunar base? This is somewhat tough to say, primarily because NASA's plans for the Artemis program keeps constantly evolving, mostly because of the changing partners that are helping the development of Artemis itself. Initially, NASA expected the Artemis 3 excursion to happen as early as 2025. However, they've recently delayed their deadline due to the fact that the SpaceX Starship HLS human landing system hasn't been fully developed as of yet. Still, the deadline for Artemis 3 is still very close, as NASA expects it to happen as early as 2026. The second landing is expected to happen only a year later in 2027. In both cases, the human landing system will serve as a base of operations for 2 astronauts, and they'll spend 5 days on the moon per mission. This will beat the 75-hour stay of the Apollo 17 mission by almost 50 hours. However, living on the Starship is only a temporary solution, and after the completion of these 2 missions, the building of the base will commence. The construction process will be a lengthy one, as it'll span over numerous Artemis missions before it's fully completed. However, it should be noted that the first habitable base will be made during the next decade, with rough estimates coming in at around 2034. This base will allow astronauts to live on the moon for up to a whole month before returning back to Earth. Plus, the mission will become far more frequent as time goes by. And honestly, we can't wait to see the base finally constructed. It's very intriguing to experience the thrill that the space race once induced. What's more intriguing is the fact that by creating the base on the moon, we'll officially physically start the conquest of the final frontier. To quote Kathy Leaders, NASA's Associate Administrator, "With more demand for access to the moon, we're developing the technologies to achieve an unprecedented human and robotic presence 240,000 miles from home. Our experience on the moon this decade will prepare us for an even greater adventure in the universe-human exploration of Mars. Here's to Artemis, and here's to hoping that there won't be any more delays."